Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diana Gugliotta, and I am here today to talk to all of you parents that will soon be licensing your teen drivers. This is a scary time, isn't it? And, we have so much information, so much research at AAA Northeast that we want to be able to provide you with the latest and greatest and the valuable information that we all have. So thank you so much for joining. Again, this is information specific to licensing your teen driver in the state of Rhode Island, which is my own state. And not only am I speaking to you as a traffic safety expert today, I'm also speaking to you as the mom of a teenage driver who was licensed in Rhode Island. So hopefully I'll be able to provide lots of information, and we will be monitoring your comments. So hopefully I can answer any questions that you have had. And I think this will be valuable information regardless of what step in the process you are in. So now that high school is coming to an end for the year, I know this is a busy time for driver education. A lot of families like to schedule their driver education sessions during summer break, which is always a great idea because you're not competing with all the other activities and sports and extracurricular activities. And also summer provides a lot of great time to practice driving, to get into the car with your young drivers. So this is part of what we're calling the 100 Deadliest Days campaign. From today through September 6th, we will be providing daily messaging around teen driver safety. We wanted to kick it off this way. We have information about licensing your teen in Massachusetts tomorrow, followed by New Jersey, New York, and then Connecticut next week. Again, if there's any information that you need, you can email us anytime to ask us these questions. But first, we're going to start off with, kind of assessing, is your teen ready? And are you ready as a parent to begin this process of learning to drive? And I think first and foremost, it's time to assess your child's maturity and sense of responsibility. So I always say, if you have a child who kind of balks at just the simple household chores, if they can't be responsible for taking out the garbage on garbage night, you might want to have some serious conversations before beginning the learning to drive process. This really is a time to have serious conversations about the enormous responsibility that teens have as drivers. And maturity, sense of respect for authority, it's also critical. The one thing that I would start off, if you are in this stage of not yet even getting into driver ed, or if your child has a permit at this point, is starting what we call commentary driving. And this is so important. Actually, in some states, they require commentary driving for driver education. So that's where your child is in the passenger riding up front with you, and you are teaching them how to navigate different traffic environments. It's amazing how much more these lessons stick, and they remember these lessons before they have the stress of actually being the driver. So just remember, they're going to absorb a lot more information when they're in the passenger seat, but they're taking a genuine interest in learning to drive from when they're behind the wheel with all that stress. So things like, driving up into that really busy intersection in town, or that dangerous intersection in your area where you've seen a lot of crashes, learning how to navigate rotaries and roundabouts and on-ramps, all of those experiences that have, been, so obvious to you because you've been driving for so long. Those are not obvious scenarios and situations that a young driver knows how to navigate. So remember, keep doing that commentary driving and just talking through the process as you go, as they're a passenger in your vehicle. Also, you'll want to take inventory, and this is where I'm being very serious, parents. Take inventory of your own driving habits. We all have bad habits. Some of us are more patient than others in traffic. Some of us speed. Some of us are a little bit more aggressive. All of those habits that you have, and maybe even the ones that you don't love about yourself, are going to be passed along to your teen driver if you're not careful. So even things like, having that extra glass of wine at dinner and then getting in the car to drive your child somewhere, they are watching you. And this is the time where we take this very, very seriously. For many years at AAA, we taught this as an in-person program with teens and parents in the same classroom and walk through the licensing process. And the first thing we would always do in those classes was we would hand out a parent report card to the teen and say, tell us more about how the parent who drives you around the most behaves behind the wheel. And then they had to share those report cards with their parents. And, it was a real eye opener. So, really take this seriously, be cognizant. If you are picking up your phone while you're in your vehicle driving, those are the bad habits that get passed along. Also, be very realistic about how much time you have to dedicate to practice driving. So how much time is sufficient? Well, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I and AAA really do recommend far more than what's required in our state laws. And we'll talk about that. But really, once your child gets their permit, you've got a year really to get all of that practice driving in. They need to hold the permit for at least 6 months. So really that translates to taking them out a minimum of 4 hours a week. And how you want to break that up is up to you. Some families will dedicate, 2 nights a week to 2 hours of driving and, learn a lot of skills at once. Others are more comfortable with a half an hour here or there, but just think about it that way. A minimum of about 4 hours a week for a minimum of 6 months is what we really recommend at AAA. So, do you have enough time? The other very important item to navigate is, what does the driver education process look like in our state here in Rhode Island? Well, first, they have to be at least 15 years and 10 months old before they can start driver education. You can register them a bit earlier, but they have to be 10 months by the date that the first class starts. Be very mindful of this. You can register, but if they can't show proof of age that first day of class, they'll keep your money and they'll kick your child out of class. Really, that's the reality. That is a mandate. So take that seriously. There will be 33 hours of classroom instruction. 8 of those hours actually focus just on impaired driving, which is, of course, a very critical issue. And, the next thing really is to determine what class schedule is going to work best for your child. So here in Rhode Island, the Community College of Rhode Island, CCRI, is sort of the governing body over driver education. They teach driver ed at all 4 campuses across our state. They also manage driver education within high schools. Many, many high schools throughout Rhode Island host those classes. It is managed by CCRI. And then, of course, we have commercial driving schools to supplement driver education. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention AAA. We do driver education at AAA, of course, and we have been for many, many years, 75 years, I bet. So you have options in schedules. Some families prefer what they call speed weeks, which is sort of, flat out, straight through all day class, kind of like you're sitting in high school again. And others like to break it up over a period of weeks, a few days a week. So just determine what would be best for you. And you can register for driver education online, either through CCRI website or a commercial driving school website. I should mention also that during the pandemic, there were accommodations to plan for driver education classes online. And that was mainly how driver education was getting accomplished throughout the pandemic. So look for changes in schedules as we move into summer for that as well. So once you're in driver education and you've covered those 33 hours, a final exam is administered in the classroom, and students need a grade of 80 or above to pass driver education. Doesn't seem too hard. And hopefully your child won't have a hard time with that. There is one curriculum that is used statewide. It's AAA's 15th edition of How to Drive, and that textbook can be purchased through our AAA branch offices. If you are a member, there is a member discount for that textbook. It can also be purchased online through CCRI or through CCRI's bookstores. So Once that is accomplished and your child has received a grade of 80 or above, a certificate is given to them for the next step. And there is a next step that a lot of parents get a little confused about, so I want to explain that. There is a requirement called the knowledge test. And if your child has done driver education through CCRI, that knowledge test can be scheduled to be administered through CCRI. If they have attended a commercial driving school, they can send $10 over to CCRI and do it through them. Or the other option is to do it as a computerized test at the Cranston headquarters for the Rhode Island DMV. And just as easy, right? We just want to make sure that teens know to study the Rhode Island Operator's Manual. That's where the majority of those test questions are coming from. We want to be certain that they know the rules of the road and the laws here in the state of Rhode Island for driving. So that once that is administered and they pass that, they are able to get a driving permit. So this is the moment, I guess, so many families are waiting for, the driving permit. I would love to recommend to all those parents, this needs to be done at a DMV branch office. And, you really have to be prepared with all those documents. So we need what's called an LI-1 form, and that needs to be signed by a parent or a legal guardian. We need an original birth certificate, so not a photocopy, we need the real thing, a social security card, and parents also need to show residency documents just to prove that they live in the state of Rhode Island. Parents, because you really are granting permission for your child to get a permit, you need to show identification at that time also. So bring your own valid driver's license, and remember, all these documents must be originals. You'll also want to bring a check for $12.50. That's how much a permit costs these days in the state of Rhode Island. Once your child has a permit, like I said before, it's valid for a year, but it's required that your child holds the permit for a minimum of 6 months. And really, you'll find that that time is going to go by very, very quickly, and you need to make the most of it. You need to get as much practice in. Your child cannot, obviously, I'm gonna state this, I think all you parents out there know this, but they cannot drive the vehicle at all on their own. They do have to have an adult with them seated in the front seat, buckled up, both of you, or an adult who is 21 or older, who's had their driver's license for at least 5 years to supervise their driving. Parents and guardians in Rhode Island are also responsible for ensuring that their teen has had that minimum number of practice hours. What's required here is 50 hours of practice. 10 of those 50 hours have to be driving at night. Visual perception is very tricky. It's a lot different driving at nighttime than it is during the day. And what's so critical is you'll want to make sure that they have a lot of diversity in their driving experience. Probably the worst mistake that parents make when it comes to behind the wheel practice is taking them on the same route over and over. So from home to the store, or home to the high school parking lot, or home to wherever the teen has a part-time job. You'll want to get them on the rural roadways where they're kind of windy. You'll want to get them on highways, byways. Really, diversity in experience is what's going to make them a safe driver in the long run. And also weather. I can't tell you how many times our phone would ring at the AAA driving school with people asking, it's raining heavily. Should we cancel our lesson? Or it's starting to snow. Should we cancel our lesson? We would always say, no, please don't, because this is New England. We have to be hardy New Englanders, but also know how to manage different weather conditions. That's very, very important. I would also say, consider behind the wheel driving lessons. Just having someone else who is a professional guide your child is very, very important. I know I did that with my own son. He learned a lot, and he also said that he found it very helpful because the driving instructor wasn't as nervous as mom was. So I thought that was a good takeaway too. Of course, if you feel like you don't need to spend that extra money, it isn't mandated here in Rhode Island. We as the parents and guardians need to give them that practice, but there's no behind the wheel training that's mandated as part of driver education. I would like to suggest, though, that if it's just you as mom or dad or a guardian, you get one other person to take your child out that you trust, that you feel is that calm voice to take your child out, just to maybe offer some different insights for them. And one really valuable tool that I wish I had had when I was teaching my own son is an app called Rhode. And that can be downloaded for Android or iPhones. It actually is an electronic log of their driving. So this way, you know, you have put in that minimum of 50 hours. I would really like to see 100, but you can also record information as to where you traveled, how long you took them out on that lesson. So it's a really helpful tool in the process. Also, CCRI's website in the driver education section has a great resource called the Parent Supervised Driving Program to help build skills. And it is specific to our state, but it helps you as a parent sequentially know what skills to review with your child. So, you know, some parents really struggle in teaching kids to park, for example, that parallel parking. There's a space in heaven, I swear, for those patient parents, but it really will help to guide you to build those skills and know what to tackle next. So 2 great resources there. When the day comes for the road test, we want to make sure, first and foremost, I think, that your teen is feeling confident and they feel really prepared. You can always push it off a little bit. You can always reschedule a road test, if you don't feel that they're ready, or if your child isn't feeling all that confident. I think, you know, that little piece of plastic, which we call a driver's license, does come with granting them a lot of newfound confidence and sometimes overconfidence. But we have found, especially in recent years, that there is a certain level of anxiety for a lot of young people that goes along with driving. You want to make sure that they're in a good place and feel confident and ready. So we want to look to the Rhode Island Driving Manual to prepare for that road test. The road test, really, I think it's helpful if you schedule the road test at the time where your child gets their permit. And here's my little tip. I know I was a very busy working single parent when my son got his permit. So instead of scheduling his road test exactly 6 months after the permit was issued, I pushed it off 9 months to make sure we had enough practice time. So have that conversation ahead of time. The folks at the DMV, they are very helpful in guiding you through that process, and they probably will look for the next available date 6 months later automatically. So that's something that you'll want to talk through and decide before you arrive for your appointment that day. If you don't want to commit to a road test date, you can always schedule it later online through the DMV or by calling 401-462-5750. That's the phone number at the DMV that handles all the road test scheduling. Okay, so that's something that you have to really give some thought to. There is also a minimum waiting period of 30 days if your child fails the road test. So that's something we won't get into because I'm feeling confident that you're going to prepare them well, but there is a waiting period, so they have time to build up those skills. The fee for a road test is $27.50. And really importantly, you'll want to make sure that you have a notarized form attesting to the fact that they've had a minimum of 50 hours practice. We have notary publics in our AAA offices, but that's just something that I want to make sure you come prepared with. That is an affidavit that is absolutely mandatory. You'll also want to have a signed application of the LI-1 form. And again, all those original documents like the birth certificate, the social security card. And if you're not going to be using your own vehicle for the road test, you need written notarized permission to use somebody else's vehicle. That's also important. You'll want to go to the DMV website too, just to review the use of vehicles or the vehicle requirements. For example, you need to have a center emergency brake in the vehicle that your child road tests in. You'll also want proof of insurance of that vehicle. So there's a lot of documents that you need to get together ahead of that event. So now I will move into graduated driver licensing. Now, graduated driver licensing started to kind of catch on in the 1990s. The last time our laws were updated here in Rhode Island was 2012, and it really offers protections. It kind of comes in 3 stages. You think of it as the permit stage, the provisional driver's license stage, and then at 18 or after a year holding a provisional license, your child will have an unrestricted driver's license. So the aim is really to protect those inexperienced drivers, kind of ease them into the process. GDL is something, graduated driver's license, we refer to as GDL, isn't necessarily something that you grew up with as a teenager yourself. So unfortunately, a lot of parents are unaware that these laws exist, and they are laws. These aren't suggestions, these are primary laws. So the first is what we call the passenger restriction. It states that in the first 12 months of licensure, a teen can only have 1 passenger in the vehicle with them that is under the age of 21. The exception or loophole to this law is that immediate family members are exempt. But I mean, this law, it's honestly, it's very helpful. Unfortunately, it's also the law that we see a lot of young people violate. A lot of young people are just looking out to help friends, and after school saying, oh, I'll drive you home, or I'll drive you home from a sports practice when they're newly licensed. It's against the law. They absolutely can't do that. But we've done a lot of research around this at the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety. And I just want to let you know that compared to driving with no other passengers in the vehicle, a 16 or 17-year-old driver's fatality risk increases by 44% when they have just 1 other passenger who's a peer, not an adult, but a peer in the vehicle with them. And with 2 passengers, it doubles their risk. So this really is a very important law. It's set in place for good reason. The other important graduated driver license restriction that you should know about, we sometimes call it the driving curfew, but think of it this way. If you as a parent, or if someone 21 or older is in the vehicle with them, the teens can drive any time of day or night. But if they don't have an adult with them seated in the front seat, they cannot drive after 1 a.m. So the time period is between 5 a.m. and 1 a.m. Legally, they can drive. That's not to say that your curfew for your household is going to be 1 a.m. It's probably going to be earlier than that, I would hope. There are some loopholes around that. So we, through the years, have gotten a lot of questions, especially from hockey moms, to be very honest. A lot of sports start, or practices or events start very early in the morning. So if a teen is on their way to a school-related event where no school transportation is provided, they can drive as early as 4 a.m. I don't know a lot of teenagers that want to be up that early, but in the law, they provide that provision. There's also a provision for driving to and from work. Let's say, their boss lets them out later because of an emergency, or if they volunteer with the fire department or a local rescue squad. There are some loopholes around that, but certainly that old adage is true. Not a lot of good things happen after midnight. We want to know that our teens are safe at home. So just think of it that way. Traditionally, no driving between or after 1 a.m. Okay. And I also just should mention that if they are driving in another state, let's say Massachusetts, our neighboring state, the curfew there is earlier for teen drivers. It's 12:30. So we have to be mindful of the state's laws where your teen is driving as well. There's also an electronic device restriction. We know as adults, all drivers here in Rhode Island are prohibited from having a cell phone in your hand. You have to go on Bluetooth if you're going to have a phone conversation as an adult. But this is different from the restriction for teen drivers. There is absolutely no cell phone use prohibited while they're driving. It's a fine of $50. and obviously no texting. 6 out of 10 teen crashes involve driver distraction. This is a huge issue for young drivers. It really is an addiction, and we have to treat it as such. The texting citations, those fines are a little different. Those start at $85. You'll just want to make sure that your young driver has a process in place, whether it be using the do not disturb function on their phone, which honestly I think is great, or putting the phone, turning it off, putting it away in a place they can't reach it in the vehicle, even in the trunk, so it's somewhere that they can't get to unless it's an emergency. It's always a good idea. The other really important law to discuss with your teens is seatbelts. Seatbelts and child restraints if they happen to be driving a younger sibling or a family member in the vehicle with them. Every passenger, as well as the drivers here in Rhode Island, have to be restrained. We have a primary law. It's a fine of $40 per passenger for those 18 and older, but for vehicle occupants and drivers under 18, it's $85 per passenger. And here in Rhode Island, it is a bit different because the citation, when the penalty would go to the driver, not the person, not that other passenger who's failed to buckle up. So they really do have to be assertive, and they're kind of the captain of the ship. They set the rules, and they need to let all their passengers know that they need to be serious about buckling up. So all the violations that we just covered, restrictions for graduated driver's licensing, they are criminal violations. So if a young person is cited, it does require an appearance in Rhode Island Family Court. Parents and guardians would have to appear with them if they violated that nighttime restriction or passenger restriction, for example. Speed, if they're speeding, if they get a citation for reckless driving or speeding, or God forbid, impaired driving, anything like that, those are adjudicated through the Rhode Island Traffic Tribunal. But the traditional restrictions on a GDL are adjudicated through Rhode Island Family Court. So conversations that you need to have early on, that you need to have now, would definitely include substances, alcohol, drugs, and prescriptions. And I mention prescriptions because at this point in time, we have more young people that are using daily medications than we've ever seen in history, right? Whether it be for anxiety, depression, ADHD, all of those can have implications on our driving. We also have to start having really serious conversations about marijuana, especially as marijuana is being legalized for recreational use in neighboring states. We're looking at that legislatively here in Rhode Island as well. Those are very serious issues, as is drowsy driving. Something that we don't often talk to our children about. We will be covering this topic this summer here on Facebook. We'll be having some webinars and discussions around drowsy driving, but it really is a danger. The average American teen gets about 5.5 hours of sleep every night and really needs a good solid 9-10 hours, just like they did back when they were in elementary school. So sleep is important. You'll also want to have conversations around the financial commitments involving driving, like who's paying for insurance, who's gassing up the car. Do you want them bringing back your car and pulling into the driveway if it's less than a quarter of a tank? These are all things that you have to kind of front load and be proactive about in your conversations. Who's paying for vehicle maintenance? And are there any other impairments that might impact your teen? I mentioned ADHD medications, and a plethora of research shows that teens with ADHD are much more likely to run into violations and crashes as teen drivers. So that's something that we will be also discussing within our 100 Deadliest Days campaign. So what to do now? We want you to feel prepared. Of course, you can always reach out to us at AAA, but we'd love you to visit teendriving.aaa.com. That website has a review of all the GDL laws listed by state that I've just discussed. So if you'd like to look back at those with friends or other family members, it's a great website to go. That's teendriving.aaa.com. You'll want to draft a parent-teen driving contract. You want to do that early on, and that's something that's negotiable. Like GDL itself, you can renegotiate the rules around driving, every 3 months or so, but you'll want to get things in writing and front load that information to your teen driver so they know what to expect. You want to download that Road Ready app so you can start logging practice hours. You want to review the Rhode Island Supervised Driving Guide so you can practice those important driving skills before the road test to make them feel more confident and prepared. Also, you want to remember that you as the parent control the whole process. If at any time after your teen is licensed that you feel, we've made a mistake here. Clearly, my son or my daughter really wasn't prepared this. They're taking risks they shouldn't be taking, or I'm not seeing their academics being taken seriously. They're moving in the wrong direction. You as the parent have the right to mail back your minor's driver's license to the DMV. Doesn't take a judge, doesn't take law enforcement to intervene in this process, because you have signed off and given them permission as a minor to get a driver's license. You completely control their ability to do so. And it is a privilege. It is not a right. So keep that in mind also. And finally, follow us here on Facebook at AAA Northeast. Until September 6th, we'll have daily content around teen safety tips, data, research that we'll be sharing to make sure that your young person gets off to a really great start. And finally, I'm going to give you my personal email address just in case you have any questions for me directly. I am dgugliotta, D-G-U-G-L-I-O-T-T-A. I'll spell that again, D-G-U-G-L-I-O-T-T-A at AAAnortheast.com. Contact me with any questions that you might have. I don't see any questions coming in as of now, so I want to wish you all well, and please have a very safe summer. Thank you all so much for watching.